Good morning. Today in the studio I have a very important self-determinationist from Quebec. Not a separatist, but he is the Louis Laberge, the president of the Quebec Federation of Labour. And we first met downstairs in the Windsor pub in Montreal during the October Revolution. A very outspoken man. But while Louis is having a smoke and a coffee, lucky man to have a smoke, we're going to deal with a serious local problem which raised its ugly head again last night at a mass meeting of 3,000, many of them new members of the Lionsgate Hospital Society, over what seems to be the eternal battle of pro-choice or pro-life and abortions. The picture being, of course, that the federal government has left a woolly therapeutic abortion section in the criminal code, which puts all the local hospitals in British Columbia under the gun as to how they're going to run abortions. And my reporter Anton Koschany was there last night, and first, before Louis Laberge, we'll find out what happened at the Lionsgate Hospital meeting and who won the battle after the break. Three years ago, they couldn't get a quorum for the meetings of the Lionsgate hospitals. Hospital Society. Last night, there were close to 3,000 eligible voters there to deal with a very touchy question of pro-choice or pro-life. Out of 155 pregnancies in Lionsgate Hospital, I am reliably informed, 100 are live births, and there are, in addition, 55 abortions. What was the choice last night? Here is my reporter, Anton Koschany.
Jack, this is the North Vancouver Rec Centre, the ice arena. We're a meeting to decide what some people say is the future of Lionsgate Hospital was held tonight. What's happened is that the people who support pro-choice meaning a choice to have or not to have abortions, have won tonight. They elected 4 people to the board of directors. Now, the mechanics of it was that there are 17 directors on the board of Lionsgate Hospital here in North Vancouver. There are elections every year for 4 of those positions, and this year those 4 came up. Of the people that are on the board, there are 4 currently who are members of what one would call pro-life. In other words, they don't want abortion. Now, they were here in full force tonight, so were the people who are pro-choice. If the pro-lifers had elected another 4 people to the board, then that would have given them 8. It would have given them a big voice in trying to get the hospital to end its abortions, to end the doing abortions at Lionsgate Hospital. The outcome tonight wasn't that way. At one time in this room, there were 2,955 eligible voters. There were a lot more people here. In fact, they were in some of the rooms next door. They were in a theater across the street. But most of them came for only one issue, although there's other hospital business discussed here. And the issue that they came for was abortion, yes or no. And it's a very emotional issue when you consider what some of the candidates had to say tonight.
It has been suggested that too much time has been wasted at hospital board meetings discussing whether or not one of them, the tiniest human, has the right to live. The value of human life should not depend on whether the child is wanted or not. Once or twice in a century, an issue arises so far-reaching in its consequences and so deep in its foundation that it calls on every person to take a stand. Abortion, like slavery, is one of those.
We have not been told that in our board meetings the medical staff have been accused of being murderers. I personally have been accused of being like a Nazi, and furthermore, every board member has been challenged and threatened with legal criminal action by the pro-life group in the board if they do not bend to their policies. This is the fact. These are the people who would have us ignore our doctors, who would have us in this one area ignore.
We as a people must see the need to make a stand. Not just a stand for more of what a fast lifestyle may demand, but more importantly, a stand for less disrespect for chastity, for morality, for life in general.
I wish to state that I fully support the present policy of our hospital. Which policy is to provide the facilities for the performance of therapeutic abortions when a woman, her doctor, and the therapeutic abortion committee have concluded that it is necessary.
It was apparent that when the first results were announced here tonight, after a wait of some time and after many people had already gone home having cast their ballots, it was apparent that the pro-choicers had won right from when the first decision for the board member from West Vancouver was announced.
1,946 were cast for Hillary Clark.
The margin of votes for the victors remained almost 2-1. It was that way through all 4 positions open on the board. The pro-choicers, the ones that some people call pro-abortionists, had won. Jack, what's sad in all this is that although they were able to fill this place right to capacity tonight, although they had lots of people sign up as members of the Lionsgate Hospital Society, the people here came for only one issue. They didn't care that the hospital needs more extended care facilities. They didn't care that the hospital is concerned about its finances. They weren't worried about doctors. They weren't worried about how the hospital was getting on with the provincial government, the fact that the hospital had a nursing shortage this summer. They cared about only one thing: abortion, yes or no, at Lionsgate Hospital. It's this single issue politics that scares one somewhat, because we forget about all the other things that are important. The people here tonight made their choice. They voted that people who come to Lionsgate Hospital should have the choice for abortions, or they should have the choice if they don't want to, but that the community shouldn't say through the hospital society yes or no. What one really has to, I guess, consider is that this isn't really the proper forum, Jack. The forum should be through Parliament. If people disagree with abortion laws, the fight shouldn't be on hospital society boards, but through the politicians who change the laws.
Anton is dead right in that final observation. Most interesting that the ratio of votes last night, about 2,000 to 850, let's say 2,000 to 1,000, 2-1. Exactly the same ratio as the abortions performed at Lionsgate Hospital. Maybe the hospital can get back to its normal administration now, because that meeting last night cost thousands of dollars, maybe as much as $25,000, and kept the hospital absolutely going round in circles. It's over for the moment, but the battle isn't yet drawn. Same problem in Surrey. We had the same problem at the General Hospital. As Anton says, it lies in the action, if ever, to clean it up one way or the other out of the federal government statutes if we have a federal government in the future. Which brings me to the topic of Louis Laberge, leader of the Quebec Federation of Labour, after the break. Mr. Laberge, do we have a country nowadays, or do we not have a country?
Oh, we'll always had one, and I'm sure we will always have one. It will change, though. I'm convinced that. Well, we saw the conference. They were at it for, what, 5-6 days? And all of those gentlemen could not arrive at an agreement. But strangely, for the first time, you saw many of the provinces backing up Quebec's stand on a lot of things. That's a new twist.
Well, I want to ask you about that. But first of all, let's get your frame of reference. Describe Louis Laberge, one of the most influential men in Quebec and president of the Quebec Federation of Labour. Didn't you go to jail once for contempt?
Oh, yeah.
How long did you spend in jail?
Well, we were sentenced for a year in jail, and as you know, you have to pass 1/3 of your sentence full-time in jail. I wasn't there part-time, I was there full-time. So that makes it, you know, a bit over 4 months. And then for the next 4 months, we were getting out of jail on Sunday night, but getting back in jail on Friday night. So we spent weekends in jail for the next 4 months, and then, of course, 1/3 of a sentence because I was a good prisoner.
It was, of course, an unjust sentence for some kind of contempt in labour matters.
Yeah, well, we refused to abide by an injunction that was simply killed our cause. We believe in our cause. They said that we had violated the injunction. There was a price to pay. We paid it.
You paid it willingly.
Willingly.
Did you no harm?
Well, no. As a matter of fact, I think it did me a lot of good. If it was to be lived again, I don't think I would do it any differently.
Louis Laberge, President, Quebec Federation of Labour. Your politics, please, simply and succinctly.
Well, I've been an NDPer for as long as the NDP has been in existence. I was at the funding convention, and of course we did work very hard for the NDP in Quebec a few years ago.
Most unsuccessfully.
Well, we came close. We came second in some 22 districts at one election when we had Robert Clich as leader of the NDP in Quebec. But in the last 10 years, unfortunately, the NDP is almost a dead horse.
Did Clich clean up the gangsterism in Quebec unions? Because that's why he was appointed.
Gangsterism. You know, there were a few culprits, and Jesus, there were not more bandits amongst 125,000 members in the construction industry than there are amongst bank managers or doctors.
That's a good comparison. Now, you yourself, though, as an NDPer, are you, one, a separatist or a self-determinationist, and explain the difference?
Well, I'm not a separatist. Being a trade unionist, I don't think I could ever be a separatist, because problems of workers the world over are the same. As a matter of fact, not only do we want to remain very closely associated with all of the workers in Canada, but we want to get closer association with all of the workers in the world.
Well, we'll talk about the international building trade unions in a little while.
Of course. But I am for self-determination, yes. I believe it is the right. We're one of the two funding people, and as well, it takes two people to make an agreement, and it takes two people to break an agreement. And since we participated in making that agreement in the first place, I believe we have the right to self-determination. But we said so, and we said it at the CLC convention, and I was very pleased with the reaction of the vast majority of the delegates. They understood that as far as we are concerned, we are prepared to fight as hard as we can for self-determination, the right of people to choose. And we said, no matter what happens, we still want to remain within the CLC. We still want to keep our ties with our Canadian brothers.
That's not the question I asked you. You know I'm asking you a political question. Are you telling me, Louis Laberge, that your policy as an NDPer is that on a referendum with 51% to leave Canada after a constitutional confrontation, you would say Quebec should be independent?
I voted in favor of the referendum. As a matter of fact, the Quebec Federation of Labour did campaign for the yes last referendum.
But I'm talking on a point of principle.
But the question was, are you prepared to give your government the mandate to negotiate a new deal? And we said yes.
But would you be prepared, always sensational and hypothetical as is my duty, to allow or to give Quebec or British Columbia the right to secede if a majority of the people after some great crisis said, we want to go?
If you have the right to self-determination, it has to go that far. Either you have the right or you don't. And you have to respect the majority.
You are in favor of that right?
Yes.
Of a majority?
Without any exception.
Tell me your honest opinion about Pierre Trudeau.
He's a hard-headed man. A lot of people were disappointed, you know, over the lack of results of the last conference, but nobody can accuse him of having changed his mind. I believe that a lot of people in Quebec took for granted the promises that he made during the referendum, that he would see to it that profound changes would be made in the Constitution. But his idea of profound changes and the idea of a lot of people about profound changes are two different things. So he hasn't changed. He's always been like that. And I don't think that he would ever be prepared to really make profound changes in that Constitution.
You, as a self-determinationist and a Quebecois, you know what changes must be made to make the people of Quebec happy.
Yep.
Don't you? Why?
Yep. One, we want Quebec to have full jurisdiction over labor and manpower. And these are decisions that were made at convention of the Quebec Federation of Labour. Education is, of course, a provincial jurisdiction, and there shouldn't be any restriction on that. Natural resources is something are very dear to our heart, and we are prepared to fight for the right to control our natural resources. And I understand that Alberta does the same, and BC, and I can't find anything wrong with it since we want it so much for ourselves.
What must be done in language rights to protect the minorities in Quebec, English, and the rest French in other parts of Canada?
Well, I'll tell you, there was not a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, and I believe that the English-speaking Quebecers in Quebec have been treated very, very fairly. I don't think that you will meet an English-speaking Quebecer who could honestly criticize the way he's being treated. I cannot say the same for French-speaking Canadians across the country.
But there are situations in Quebec, which you must tell me about, whereby people seem to be forced to send their children to English-speaking countries.
That's a lot of baloney. Look, we say any new Quebecer will have, if they want their kids to attend public school, will have to send their kids, of course, to the French system. If they don't want that, they can always send them to college. And you know,
you mean private school?
Private school.
But new people coming in must go to the French school.
Well, if I come and live here in BC with my family, I expect that my children, if I wanted them to attend public school, would have to attend public school in the English language.
But that's not what I asked you, really. I asked you, what should be, from your point of view, as an NDP or Quebec Labour leader, in the Bill of Rights on language?
Oh, as a matter of fact, I would be opposed in having a Bill of Rights on language in the Constitution.
It surprised me.
Yeah, well, I guess I do.
Because I know that Trudeau wants.
I know that Trudeau
He wants the French and English languages entrenched in the Constitution.
And that, as an idea, I'm not opposed to that. But you see, what is wrong with this is that Canadian people believe that us in Quebec, we want Canadians to all be bilingual. That's not it at all. That's not it at all. It's far from it. We do want to be able to decide for ourselves the official language of Quebec. It is French. That does not mean that we lack respect for the English language, not at all. And a Quebecer that would not learn English in these days is not a Quebecer.
The 101 was a tough bill with all this petty nonsense about signs and storefronts.
I agree that there are a few things in Bill 101 that had to be changed, and we're in favor of that. But Bill 101 was absolutely necessary in my opinion. For instance, we have a very, very large Italian community in Quebec. And while we have no problem, I mean, Italians and French pea soups and like the Irishmen.
Gee, don't say pea soups, that's racist.
Well, I don't care.
I'm only joking.
I know. Well, we live very well together, but unfortunately, all of the immigrants coming into Quebec, the vast majority of them were sending their kids to English schools. And so Bill 101 had to be adopted. We supported Bill 101.
Wasn't freedom.
Well, you know, if you go and live in France, what kind of school would your kids be attending? They would be attending French school one day. Well, why is it so strange in Quebec?
Well, it's just, you know, this English duality of common law where we prize our freedom to be anarchists if we want to, whereas you in Quebec were saying, if you're an Italian immigrant or a Scotch immigrant, send your kids to French-speaking schools.
Immigrant, yeah. But if you are a Quebecer and you are English-speaking, you send your kids, of course, to English-speaking schools.
Listen, we're getting off the point. We started off about Trudeau. How will you vote in the next election in Quebec?
Oh, I'd vote against Trudeau. I voted against him every time, every opportunity I had, but that apparently has not hurt him too much.
What about provincial election?
Provincial election, we supported the PQ last election, and we said, because the PQ has promised that there would be a referendum on the question of secession or separation or whatever you want to call it, we believe that the PQ would make a good government, And it is the only political party that is an honest, open, democratic party that has a chance of getting rid of the Bourassa corrupt government.
You don't want back these corrupt liberals?
Nope.
No, but Ryan is not corrupt.
Ryan is not corrupt, but I think he's more dangerous.
He's more than which?
He's more dangerous. Jesus.
More dangerous?
Yeah, he's guided by the hand of God. That always frightens the hell out of me.
You mean? Give me that again. How do you say that in French? Guided by the hand of God.
Il est guidé par la main de Dieu.
Easy enough. After the break. Let's have a word with Louis Laberge of the Quebec Federation of Labour about this man Levesque. You vote for him and you'll probably vote for him again.
Oh, yeah, without any hesitation.
Has he, his legislative program, what has he done for the people of Quebec that the old corrupt liberals never would nor did do?
All right, there are many things that he's done. For instance, he has cleaned up all of that dirty money that politicians were getting. Now, the financing of the political parties in Quebec must be open to the public. The NDP supported that, and of course, you won't find it strange that I supported that idea. That's a good thing. He has adopted legislation on health and safety for the workers and plants and shops and construction sites and so forth that you haven't seen the like in the North American continent. It's just not being implemented, being into practice, but we supported that piece of legislation. He has adopted good pieces of legislation. Automobile insurance. Now, the only criticism we have against the government is that he didn't go far enough. For instance, on automobile insurance, and this was part of the PQ program, they only went halfway. Well, you know, some people could say, well, my cup is half empty, or you could say it's half full. So, but the half that they have adopted is a good piece of legislation.
In other words, you're telling me that he brought kind of reasonable West Coast type legislation.
Oh, bullshit. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. You can say it. I can't, but you can. But he did. He copied the Manitoba, British Columbia automobile insurance.
And Medicare works, you know that, best in Quebec than anywhere else in Canada.
No deterrent fees?
No deterrent fees. The doctors, they are either in or they're out.
Do you agree with me that the doctors, like it to lump it, are really happy socialists these days?
They're happy. Whether they're socialists, I doubt that. I saw you last night with the doctors, and that was a good program. And I don't know how you could refrain from laughing when the poor doctors were crying on your shoulder. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I am not opposed to doctors getting a better deal if we can afford it. I'm not against that.
They're a union.
They're a union. Let them negotiate like us. But that they would charge the poor little people when they're sick, I'm against that. We have Medicare for that in order to make sure that every citizen would get proper treatment.
The only difference is you can strike and so the building doesn't get built. They strike and people die.
Well, we also have some responsibility, even if we strike in hospital, and we do represent people in hospitals, we have to make sure that the essential services are respected, and we're for that. So we cannot strike in an hospital the way we strike on a construction site, for instance.
Next, we're going to talk to Louis Laberge about the splits in the labour movement in Quebec. CNTU, building trades unions, Quebec Federation of Labour. You're in a mess, eh?
Not too bad.
After the break. I know some of the troubles of the Quebec Federation of Labour in relation to the building trade unions, but Louis Laberge, a forthright man, will tell us about all the splits you have. The power of the CNTU, who are
all
still...
Right. CNTU represents about 160,000 people in Quebec. You will remember, no doubt, that in '72, they had about 225,000 people. And there was the split, of course, in the CNTU, when 45,000 members quit the CNTU to found the CSD. Then the 40,000 provincial government employees quit the CNTU too, and then the aluminum, another 10 or 12,000 people quit the CNTU, and they remained independent and went after them. Then there's the teachers group with about 70,000 members, the Teachers
Militant group.
Association, a militant group. And then, of course, there are the English-speaking teachers who are in two different associations, the Catholic English-speaking and the Protestant English-speaking. You know, it's not only the French-speaking who've got problems. Anyway, and then, of course, there is the Quebec Federation of Labour with 315,000 members. Now, of course, I do include in that the construction people, even though we do have some problems with them, or apparently they have problems with us. Here's what happened in two ways. Under the law in Quebec, every construction worker has got to belong to a recognized association, either the CSD, the CNTU, or the Quebec Federation of Labour Building Trades. About a year ago, well, as a matter of fact, it was last October, close to a year ago, in San Diego, there was a convention of the International Building Trade Unions. A resolution was adopted there. The effect of that resolution was that when the executive committee of the Quebec Building Trades Council met, they expelled the FIPO, which is the electrician groups who got away from the IBEW 10 years ago. Now, that's not a recent affair. And two chartered locals of the CLC, also ex-IBEW members, and they expelled them. And they wanted us at the Quebec Federation of Labour to do the same thing. We said, hell no, never. We are not going to be governed by a decision taken anywhere else, particularly not in San Diego. Those people are affiliated with the Quebec Fed, and unless they violate our constitution, they will remain affiliated with the Quebec Fed.
To put it in our terms, we've had the same trouble here at Duke Point and in a different way at Whistler. But to put it in my terms, the International Building Trades meeting in San Diego want you to expel chartered locals of the Quebec Building Trades.
Two chartered locals of the CLC.
Of the CLC?
Of the CLC. I imagine that. And of course, then the battle came over to the CLC. And I said to Dennis McDermott, president of the CLC, how would you have reacted if the Quebec Federation of Labour had decided to bend down under the dictatorship of the building trades and we had expelled two CLC charter locals?
Just a minute. The building trades, the building trades work on your sites in Quebec? Under the law?
Yes, and the vast majority of the people are still with us. And all we want is to give them the right to vote freely as to whether they want to remain with the building trades or remain with their international union if they so want, but also with the Quebec Federation of Labour.
In other words, you want a willingness from them to work beside the Quebec Federation of Labour and its chartered locals?
We want their freedom of choice.
And if they don't work beside you, you'll raid them?
If they don't want to stay in the Quebec Federation of Labour, they can get out.
Oh,
but we are not going to let them get easily away with it. We want the building trades people. We work hard to sign them up. I attended I don't know how many meetings throughout Quebec when we signed them out of the CNTU. We know that the vast majority of them want to remain with us, and all we want is for them to have the opportunity to express their willingness.
Dennis McDermott told me that unless the building trades unions, internationals, pull themselves together and stop this fighting with CLC unions, he is prepared to set up chartered locals and invite the dissident building trade members into them. That is your position?
Yep. Oh yes. We're not going to let them get away with it, and we cannot let people make decisions when they don't even belong.
This could be the biggest crisis facing the Canadian labour movement, because at the moment there are 400,000 members of the building trades unions out of your 2-point-some million members.
That's another BS. They never had, and they never paid for 400,000 members.
300,000.
Well, I know that Ken Rose said that, but he's lying. I'm very sorry to say that.
Well, hundreds of thousands of building trade members.
200,000.
200,000.
Right.
You've not. Give me 4 no. Give me 3 no. We'll accept 2. You are telling me though that the per capita Jews from the internationals to the CLC have been stopped.
Have been stopped.
Because of this jurisdictional dispute in Quebec and probably in British Columbia.
And because of their fights with Jack Monroe of the IWA for a long-standing fight. It's been going on for 20 years.
What's wrong with these international unions? Do they think they own Canada?
Some of them do, I believe, and that's why they have problems. We don't have problems. I don't call it a crisis. I call it something that has to be done, has to be faced.
Listen, if they picketed your sites and the Teamsters supported it across the country, there'd be trouble.
Yep. If they wanted to prevent us from doing our job, there would be trouble.
No violence, though.
Oh, maybe a little bit.
Webster and Louis Laberge, after the break. This is Learn Along with Webster. This is a refresher course on the left hand of Quebec. How's that?
Very good.
Why did Levesque go wrong? Why did Levesque not become the leader of the new Democratic Party for all the country? And he might have been able to do some good instead of all this damage.
Well, Levesque is a very good man. Honest, straightforward. We did try to get him with the NDP, you know. Well, we were not successful. I guess we were not good salesmen enough. And this is when he decided to go with the Liberal, and he hasn't changed. I mean, he nationalized the Quebec Hydro, and he was working towards those things. And as a matter of fact, the Liberals thought he was going too far, too fast, so he quit the Liberal.
He was with Lesage, wasn't he?
He was with Lesage, yeah. That was a pretty damn good government.
Lesage government.
Days, yeah.
It didn't go far enough, fast enough.
Well, he did. Lesage and his people believed that Rene Levesque wanted to go too far, too fast, and this is when Levesque and Lesage parted.
Now, you don't like Trudeau, you don't trust Trudeau, do you? Yeah.
Well, I believe that Monsieur Trudeau is an honest man. He's a hard-headed, honest man, cold-blooded, honest man. I don't agree with him, but he is an honest man.
Let's go back to the original triumvirate that came into government in '67 or something. There was Pelletier, Marchand.
Jean Marchand, and Pierre Trudeau.
Would it have been different if Marchand had kind of moved in instead of Trudeau to the first line?
Well, Marchand would have been much easier, you know, to get along with. He was a likable fellow, but I believe that Monsieur Trudeau is even a lot straighter than Jean Marchand. You know, Jean Marchand, he changed his mind on quite a few things. Pierre Trudeau, at least you can rely on him on that. He's hard-headed but straight.
What do you people in Quebec, I mean your particular elitist Labour leadership group, what do you think of Joe Clark?
Joe who?
Yeah,
No.
that's what you think of him.
Well, a nice guy. Nice guy.
Can never win Quebec.
Well, they will have to work real hard at it. Last time, last time most every Quebecer voted for the Liberals and Monsieur Trudeau. Well, they elected 71 out of 72. Mm-hmm. But because there was no opposition, I mean, who could we vote for? The NDP is disorganized. I voted NDP because there was a candidate in my district, and some of us did vote NDP.
That's federal. Your vote is
federal, but they have no organization. The Conservative didn't have a much better organization, so that people didn't really have a choice, so they voted Liberal.
Now, when you take the results of that referendum and see the number of people who did not want to say yes, who said no, 1 million some, wasn't it? 1,200,000, 1,300,000.
Well, their vote came out some 59 against 41%.
Does this not indicate that there is enough basic discontent among the people, perhaps anti-Canadianism among the people of Quebec, that despite all the window dressing, separation eventually must come?
Well, I cannot say that the 41% who voted yes are all separatists. I voted yes, and I'm not necessarily a separatist, but we want a New Deal, and we wanted to vote yes because we believe that the Quebec government ought to have a clear mandate to go and meet with the federal government and try and get a New Deal. This is what Monsieur Trudeau promised during the referendum.
Next question. Conditions in Quebec for the trade unionists as compared to the rest of the country. We have fairly good wage protection here now. 12, 14, 15% increases are not unusual. We have indexed pensions, 15%. Fryer squeezed out a social credit for the indexed pensions for the civil servants. Can you compare if a British Columbia trade unionist went to Quebec to work as a specialist, how would his money stack up? Certainly his house is...
Not bad at all. To start with, his house is about 2/3 of what he pays, you pay here in BC. The income taxes may be a bit higher. The wages in certain trades would be a bit lower. But we're not doing that bad. To be very honest with you, we have made tremendous progress in the last 10 years. The unions are starting up. You know, we're organized at about 40% in Quebec. I mean, all of the central labor bodies put together, that represents
But you
about
and the
40%.
CNTU and the CSD don't all sit in the same assembly, do you?
No. We do at times meet, but at times we don't meet.
But you do have 40% of working labor organized in
Quebec. Unfortunately, in the private sector, it is much lower. It's about 23%. And of course, in BC, it's much better than that. And we're working hard to improve that. But our minimum wage is the highest in Canada.
How much?
It's the highest in Canada. It's now $3.27, I believe, or...
We're much about the same. I think we're going to 360 sometime soon, are we not? Minimum wage here is going from... to 365 from now on. And of course, the employers scream that with the 365 minimum wage...
Yeah, 365 would be higher. In Quebec, with 347. And they're screaming.
And they're screaming. Why are they screaming? Because it's going to put their sweatshops out of business?
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, they asked me, well, would you rather see the shop close? I said, yes. If we believe that a plant is important enough to the Quebec society to keep it open, then it should be subsidized by the government, not by the workers working in that.
Now you're right down to Western alienation, Mr. Levesque, Mr. Laberge.
I'm not feeling insulted if you call me Levesque.
All right. Okay, and I'm saying to you now that the housewife, the trade unionist wife in British Columbia, gets extraordinarily irate when she has to pay vast sums for Korean or Taiwanese clothing because of quotas imposed to protect $300,000 perhaps low-paid jobs in the textile industries in Quebec and Ontario. Yep. Why should we have to do that? Why can't we buy the cheaper stuff from the Orient and let your people live or die according to the economics?
That's a good question. I'll tell you this. I think it would cost us a lot more if all of those people were unemployed. You know, in the textile and garment industry, the vast majority of the workers are in Quebec and, of course, Ontario. If you close down those plants, the vast majority of those people could not be retrained to work elsewhere, the vast majority of them. Do you think it would cost you less if all of those people became social assisted people for the rest of their lives?
I suppose we look at it selfishly from this side of the mountains. Right. We don't see the lines of the unemployed. We want to buy the cheaper stuff without quota.
You want to buy the cheaper stuff, and then you want us to be almost drowned by Japanese goods that are imported into Quebec because you're selling them some wood.
Listen, we've been stuck with the freight rates, cheap one way, dear the other way, to protect Ontario and Quebec for 100 years.
Well, I think you've done better protecting Ontario than you've done for us.
Well, we regard you as the same, Quebec and Ontario. Yeah. And now the West is subsidizing $3 billion a year in oil prices.
Well, you don't look that bad for it all, don't you?
Don't judge by me. Listen, how'd you like to take some phone calls?
Sure.
In either French or in English. Keep the French slow. Not for Louis, but for me. At the usual numbers after the break. Louis Laberge is the president of the Quebec Federation of Labour, one of the most commanding figures, more ways than one. Correct.
How much I owe you?
In the country. Go ahead to Louis Laberge.
Bonjour, Monsieur Laberge.
Up a bit, please.
Pardon me?
Bring the phones up a bit.
Okay. Bonjour, Monsieur Laberge.
Bonjour.
Bienvenue à la province de Colombie-Britannique.
Oh, I've been here a few times, as you know.
Yeah. Mr. Laberge, I have two questions for you, please.
Uh-huh.
One is, you've mentioned that the unemployed textile workers would go on social assistance. Why can't the, under the government's job retraining program, which is presently making mechanics, plumbers, and electricians out of former ditch diggers, why can't that same job retraining program be applied to former textile workers?
Well, because you cannot do that overnight, you know, and you must remember that those people, quite a few of them are getting older. They're not as young as they used to be. And their schooling was not perhaps as adequate as it should have been. But just the same, I know that one of these days people will have to be retrained. We're all for that. But if the job were to disappear overnight, you'd have thousands and thousands of unemployed people on our hands, and it would cost us certainly no less than what it is costing to support those jobs.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Jack?
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to ask your visitor about the Space Research Corporation, Quebec's armament industry.
Do you know anything about the Space Research Corporation, this one that was getting involved in all the controversy?
Well, a bit, you know. I'm not an expert on it.
No, thank you very much, ma'am. Doesn't make much sense. Go ahead, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur Laberge.
Bonjour.
I would like to know, well, I'm from Quebec, but I've been in BC 15 years. I know some people who have been working in Quebec, and then they want to work here in British Columbia, and they cannot have a union transfer. Like, you know, like they work in northern Quebec, tradesmen, and then they come here, they can't have any transfer.
Why?
What?
Why? Why can't they be transferred?
I don't know. I mean, they just say, well, that union in Quebec, and then our union is different.
Well, if you belong to the CNTU when you were in Quebec, then you're correct. It is quite different.
Yeah,
but if you were a member of one of our unions, you shouldn't have any difficulty in transferring here.
Yeah, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I belong to IWA. I don't even know there's an IWA in Quebec.
Yes, there is.
There is. I didn't even know that. But I mean, how come it's so hard to, you know, like to transfer from one province to another?
Oh, yes, you can do that. And if you're in the IWA, you talk to Jack Monroe, and I'm sure he'll fix it up for you.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, could you tell me when the textile industry in Quebec or Montreal are going to upgrade their quality? Their prices are atrocious, or let's say with today's wages, it's even, but their quality is just terrible. And another
now they're blaming you as they're calling you the manufacturer. They're saying that the prices are atrocious, the prices and the quality is poor.
Well, I think I have to disagree with that. Jesus, you know, when you compare productivity in plants in Quebec or anywhere else, our worker is as good as anywhere else. As a matter of fact, let me give you a good example.
Please.
The GM plant in Sainte-Thérèse. For the last 10 years, they've always come first or second as far as not only productivity, but also quality of the product is concerned. So, but of course, when you talk about a textile plant that has an old, obsolete equipment, you cannot produce as well and as much as people with modern equipment. That's a difference.
Thank you, ma'am. Go ahead, please.
Do you think that Dennis McDermott has the guts to throw these international unions out of the CLC?
If he has the guts of what?
To throw the international unions out of the CLC.
No, nobody wants to throw international unions out. I'm an international union man. I've been all my life.
Which international?
The International Association of Machinists, and then I went to work for the UAW, Dennis McDermott's union, as a matter of fact. So I'm not against international union, but what we're saying to international unions, thank God, the majority of them have understood, some have not understood. We live in two different countries, United States and Canada. There's two different countries. While we still want to belong to international unions, we don't want them to make decisions for us. That's it.
But let me get that quite clear. McDermott made it perfectly clear the other day to me that if they continue to drag their feet on the jurisdictional problems, refusing to work beside CLC unions, there's going to be trouble, and he would set up chartered locals.
Yeah, but it's not because they're international union. Now we're talking about the problem with the building trades.
Well, it's partly international because the decision was made in San Diego by the internationals.
That's right. Building trade unions are international unions. What I'm trying to say is...
I remember when Joe Morris was accused of going cap in hand to Washington, D.C. to try and settle this and failed?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Joe Morris was always going somewhere, cat in hand. No, that's besides the point. What I'm trying to say is this. If Dennis McDermott takes action, as a matter of fact, he is going to give a press conference this noon on this. It's not because they're international union. It's because the building trades will not want to work with the seals.
Do you have the same problem of, not problem, but do you have common site certification for the building trades in Quebec? You see, here...
The only place in Canada where every construction worker has got to belong to a union is in Quebec. Every construction worker has got to be a member of a union.
Ah, but what the Building Trades Council wants here and got at Duke Point, although they didn't choose to fight the IWA, was a common site where everyone not must just be not unionists, but building trades unions only. And the IWA were told, you don't really belong here, but nobody challenged them.
Yeah, well, I know there is that problem, and of course we have that problem also in Quebec. Who should be responsible for maintenance, for instance, of buildings? The construction workers want it. Our industrial unions want it. So there is some problem, but we get along.
But I still say that if you and you've already set up chartered locals from the 10-year ago split. But if McDermott does that in the West Coast and the Teamsters get involved, we're going to have disruptions.
Well, you know, it's funny. In Quebec, the Building Trades Council of Quebec kicked out the Teamsters local from the building trades 8 years ago. And if now they get back to work with the Teamsters, that will make strange bedfellows, won't it?
Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning. Bonjour, Louis.
Bonjour.
And the supervisors is scabbing on the workers.
Yep.
What happens in Quebec in this?
Yes, unfortunately, even though we have what we call the anti-strike breakers law, that only forbids employers from hiring workers to replace strikers. But supervisors can always be used to try and replace the workers. I must tell you that we're not over concerned with that, because a supervisor replacing a worker does not always make it a good replacement. But as you said, the public suffers for it.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please.
Bonjour, Mr. Laberge.
Bonjour.
I'd like to know if it's a matter of protection or what the needs of guard in Quebec, everywhere in the construction.
Didn't get that, did you?
No.
A matter of what?
Of protection.
Over what?
The need of card. That you need card everywhere in...
Oh, you mean union card?
Oh, I think I know what you're talking. You're talking about the construction industry, don't you?
Yeah.
All right. You see, in Quebec, because of all of this awful unemployment in the construction, you see, there's 225,000 workers who are recognized as people who could work in the construction industry. There's no room for 225,000 workers. Actually, there might be 70 to 75,000 who are working. So those cards, what it means is that people who do earn their living in the construction industry must have the first chance to fill the job opening.
Does that mean a trade union card?
Yes, it's almost like seniority in our plants. It's not that much different. So that people who have been in the construction industry will have the first crack at an open job, in order to try and make sure that at least there will be some thousand who can make a decent living in the construction industry. Because despite the high hourly wages, the majority of them gains pretty pitiful amounts of money in a year. As a matter of fact, I believe that the average was $7,000 last year.
Yeah, of course, they never counted unemployment insurance in BC if they worked for 9 months and 3 months UIC.
Well, if they were to do that in Quebec, they would be all right, too.
Raises another point. Trudeau was very strong at the conference on the mobility of labour. Now, we know that Quebec and Ontario had a spat about construction workers not crossing the border without approval for jobs, right?
Right.
We know that in Newfoundland, you've got to be a resident before you can get a job, even although Alberta's full of Newfies who've come out here to work at Fort McMurray. Where do you stand on that?
Well,
on the mobility of labour without
we're in favor of mobility of workers, of course. We must be in favor of that. And of course, what happened between Ontario and Quebec, I believe politicians make a big thing out of something that could have easily been settled. There was no more restriction imposed on Ontario workers than there are on Quebec workers. Same difference. And it's all those cards again, you know, those working permits.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning, gentlemen. I am an Albertan who has chosen Alberta for the past 30 years, and I have done considerable travel for the last 2 years in your province, Mr. Laberge of Quebec, and I have a son married in Quebec City. Since the referendum, I have had some great disappointment. I just returned last month from your province, and I found that there is such a difference in the stores. Nobody wanted to speak English anymore. And I felt like having traveled Paris. You know, like some years ago when I went to Paris.
Yes, well, you see, unfortunately, there are always extremists, you know, as we had to suffer for many years through extremist English-speaking Quebecers.
Speak white.
Now, yes, speak white. Now you have some extremists who are French-speaking Quebecers. But generally speaking, we still live harmoniously together with the English-speaking.
Try that one again. Your English is...
Harmoniously.
Harmoniously.
Thank you, sir.
No, your English is magnificent. But...
Well, I don't know whether it's magnificent, but at least I get understood, I hope.
Of course, you have a college degree in the English language.
Oh, yeah, I was pretty good. The college degree, I haven't got neither in French nor in English.
Webster and Louis Laberge for one more segment at 6 after the break. Go ahead to Louis Laberge.
I'm so glad to see Mr. Laberge here. But if I were living in Montreal, I think I wouldn't feel quite so harmonious about your language business. Relatives this summer told me, who live there, that in libraries the signs are only in French. And in some of those libraries, 80% of the people using those libraries are English speaking. Can you tell me about that?
No, well, you know, let me for about 30 seconds try and explain the sentiment. We've had English-speaking Quebecers that have been there for 3 generations, and they can't even say oui in French. Now, that's bad faith. Now we have Quebecers, French-speaking Quebecers, who are now refusing to say one word in English. That's bad faith.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that English-speaking Quebecers use libraries and all the books are in French,
No, they're not at books.
Oh.
The signs in the libraries themselves, like go this way for that, you know, the signs are in French.
well, if you were to come to Montreal and you saw a sign, you know, instead of being, you know, written stop, it's marqué arrêt, I hope you would still stop, eh?
Well, the point is, though, that I believe in
It's an international traffic sign anyway.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any words on it. I mean, only a hand or something like that.
Arrêt.
Arrêt.
Well, don't arrêt yet.
Can I just finish something here?
Yep.
You know, I believe in a bilingual Canada, and I was just appalled this summer when I was at the Banff Springs Hotel to see the signs in English and Japanese.
Why? Why were you appalled? The Japanese bring a lot of money there. There are thousands of Japanese tourists, and the object of the Lake Louise and Banff Springs Hotel is to keep the Japanese tourists happy to spend lots of money.
Right, but they should be in English, French, and then if you want to add Japanese or anything else, that's great. But, you know, the other thing that...
Well, you and I won't fight over that one.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Jack.
Morning.
I have a couple of questions for your guest this morning.
Right.
Mr. Laberge, why do Canadian unions have to belong to internationals? And also, how much of our union dues goes to the international?
All right. Why do we belong to international unions? Simply because when we first got organized, it is international unions who came here and gave us a hand to organize. Now, through the years, of course, the relationship has changed. For instance, members in the UAW, United Auto Workers, of course they pay dues, and of course they pay a per capita tax to the international union. But, you know, it does make sense in that industry because we have a General Motor plant in St. Therese. We could close down that plant for 15 years and General Motors would not have batted an eye. As a matter of fact, We were successful on 2 strikes in General Motors in St. Therese because of the fullest cooperation we received from the members of the International Union, UAW, across Canada and in the States.
And money.
And money. As a matter of fact, I believe that the UAW is not doing a very good business with us in Quebec. I believe they've been in the red ever since they've had members in Quebec. And the same goes for the steelworkers, as a matter of fact, and for a few other international unions. They call us a bit turbulent in Quebec. But that does not change the fact that we don't want the decisions to be made in the States for the workers here in Quebec or in Canada. We want to make our decisions.
But now you've got to draw the differentiation. There's the CIO unions, like the UAW, and the steelworkers, where you have autonomy in Canada.
Oh, yes, they have complete
And then you've got
autonomy.
the old craft unions, like the building trade unions, where there is not always autonomy in Canada.
That's right.
Where
And
they
that's
have to go to down there for permission to strike.
And that's why there is problems now within the building trades, because some international unions have not recognized that people work in 2 different countries.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Monsieur Laberge.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to pursue this question with you a little bit further that the previous caller was talking about, and it's not, as you say, a question of just paying a minor amount of dues to the United States. I mean, the Corporations and Labor Unions Returns Act reports that Statistics Canada puts out show that it's a multi-million-dollar of Canadian dues going down to the United States.
Yeah, but you see, those reports do not show a clear picture of the true situation, because administration, there's a part of it is, of course, money spent for Canadians, and of course it's part of the dues, strike benefits, all of the full-time people. Well, I mean, we have a lot of full-time people in Canada.
Canadians appointed in Canada by
Canadians
the CIO
appointed in Canada, elected in Canada by Canadians. Now, we have a lot of those.
See,
now,
I'm
of
in
course,
a Canadian union.
if you don't mind my pursuing this just a little bit longer, of course, some international unions are charging high per capita tax, and they don't give very good service, particularly in the building trades. This is why there is a problem.
This is why Louis is presently fighting them, correct?
Right. Well, listen, I'm in a Canadian union, and a lot of our members come from international unions, and I'm afraid they don't have quite the same rather unrealistic, and I think unrealistic view of the willingness of the international unions to support strikes here. And this argument that, somehow our position is strengthened by all this great solidarity that we're going to have with workers in the United States just isn't true.
Are you with Kmart?
On top of that, what is true is that we are struggling against much the same kind of international corporations.
Well, let me say this to you. In Quebec, we've had a lot of strikes recently, as you know. We have never asked, and never shall we ask permission to anybody to strike in Quebec. The workers in Quebec will decide that, whether they're members of a Canadian union or members of an international
Except for the building trade unions.
In building trade union, there are problems, and things are changing. For instance, the Canadian Paper Workers Union, not too long ago, they were international union, and they walk out of it. They didn't walk out of it. There was some understanding, some agreement, and now they have formed a Canadian union.
Okie dokie, next call. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, is Mr. Laberge familiar with the CCU?
The what?
CCU.
What's that?
Federation of Canadian Unions?
Oh, yes. Madeleine Parent?
Pardon me?
He's talking about Kent Rowley's.
Kent Rowley's.
Rowley.
We kicked them out of Quebec many years ago.
Did you hear that?
CCU.
Yeah,
we kicked them out of Quebec many years ago. They were in the textile industry.
Why did you kick them out?
Because they kept people on strike in order to support the second front demanded by the Russian, rather than work for the benefit of the members. And I know I was involved. We had a bitter fight, and we finally were successful in kicking them out.
I gather you did.
And if they're here in BC, you're welcome to keep them.
Thank you very much. That's what I call a forthright answer. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
Mr. Levesque.
Yes.
Yes, you're talking to an Easterner here. I just moved out to BC about 5 months ago.
Where from?
Born and brought up in New Brunswick.
Ah.
I lived in Ottawa for 11 years.
Forget the history now and ask your question.
Okay.
I want to ask Mr. Laberge why it is that after the French Canadians fought for years and years to have the country made bilingual, the minute it went bilingual, all of the road signs, street signs, all of the signs over all the merchant stores, they all was taken down. All English signs were ripped down and French was put up in French only. Now you go into Quebec, and if you get in the city of Montreal and you're a stranger, if you don't know how to read French, you're there for the rest of your life because there's not a road sign.
Well, that's okay. You're welcome.
Oh, look, how can you answer that kind of question?
No. The signs are not only in French. French has to be prominent, but they're in both.
You can't put Coca-Cola in French any more than you can put it in English.
As a matter of fact, we're boycotting Coca-Cola, so don't drink something else.
Are you still having trouble with 7-Up?
No, I believe the strike has been settled.
That was a famous strike in Quebec.
And I believe Coca-Cola is also being settled at the moment.
It's not so long, said Webster, to go back in history when some of your soft drink workers were making $2 an hour in Quebec and $4 an hour in Ontario. That was the basic problem, wasn't it?
Yep.
You straighten that out.
As a matter of fact, we have made tremendous progress in the last 10 years, and we still have some catching up to do.
Louis Laberge, you've been a forthright speaker as ever. You have set your face against interference from San Diego and the building trades unions. You support McDermott on the proposition that unless they show some willingness to adhere to the guidelines and jurisdiction, you will continue, you would never expel your own chartered locals, which the building trades don't like.
Never, and I will be standing side by side with Dennis McDermott.
And you vote for Levesque in the next election because he's a good social democrat.
Yep.
And you won't vote for Trudeau in the next election because you don't like his basic policies.
Well, I don't think he will miss my vote because he never had it.
My thanks to Louis Laberge.
Thank you.
Get our limousine to take Louis back in the style to which he is accustomed to the hotel in North Vancouver. After the break. You can't say that Louis Laberge is not outspoken. You certainly can't say that. And he carries a lot of clout in Quebec, that same Louis Laberge. However, I've got time to grind a couple of my own axes this morning. And the first is a story that 20 members of the Vancouver Police are applying for the job of chief. A waste of time, you might say. And I seem to be the only person who bothers, in principle, to nag about the method of selection. Nothing against the excellent high-caliber officers in the Vancouver City Police Force. Far from it. And the guy who's been picked, who's in all probability Bob Stewart, will make an excellent police chief. But I cannot understand, 15 seconds from now, why Jack Volrich has, along with his police board, set down the rules. 9th, Winterton resigns, or announces his resignation. Next Monday, I think it is, we're going to have a new police chief. And here's what Volrich had the gall to tell me. Sir, you're a lawyer and I'm a plain-spoken broadcaster. You don't want the best possible policeman across the country. You want the best man from within the Vancouver Police Force. That's a fair assessment.
Yes, that's what it's going to amount to, but we're satisfied that we have such a high caliber here that the person we choose can be considered among the top officers in Canada.
And you don't want to accept perhaps the best man the RCMP has. No RCMP officers need apply for the job of the Chief Constable of Vancouver Police Force. Is that correct?
That's also correct.
Do you see that? I'm just a simple-minded idiot, I know, and I shouldn't be nagging about this. It's almost disloyal to nag at some of my very good friends in the Vancouver Police Force. And no doubt they will pick the best man in Canada, but I strongly object to this hand-picked successor business, where they arrogantly decide in the Vancouver Police Board that they're not going to take applications from the rest of the country, so they can get the whole thing wrapped up nice and cozy and within a matter of a 2-week period, less 1 day, and pick their own man. It's not right. It's bad public policy. It's against the public interest and principle. This is one country. We don't only pick our chief of police from the... We should not pick our chief of police only from the city of Vancouver. We must make the job wide open for applicants from all across the country. That is not going to be done now, and I'm disappointed indeed that there has not been any public furor about this tunnel vision, short-sightedness to suit the convenience of the Vancouver Police Board, to say the very least. But talking about convenience, last month our Solicitor General, Bob Kaplan, announced that our prisons would follow the American lead and allow overnight family visits at 5 federal penitentiaries. One of the programs is right here in BC, creating as many tensions as supposed to relieve. Steve Wyatt was out at Kent yesterday.
Jack, that's the Kent Maximum Security Institution here in Agassiz. It's a contemporary showplace that took over where the BC Pen in New Westminster left off. And come this spring, it will be the site of a very contemporary experiment. A few trailers and mobile homes will be moved in to accommodate family visits for as much as 48 hours. Parents, children, and wives, and common-law wives, as long as the inmate can prove that he had been living with the woman for 6 months before being committed here. But there's a problem. The prisoners aren't happy. They say the program doesn't go far enough because it doesn't include single inmates. They want their girlfriends to be able to come for the weekend as well. At Millhaven Institution in Kingston, Ontario, a prisoners group there has decided to boycott the whole program. And they point out that prisoners who do take part have to join the inmate population again sooner or later. And there's a fellow here by the name of Sean Shannon who's been quoted as saying that the whole program is destructive because the single prisoners aren't allowed the same rights. Jack, it's not clear yet if the inmates here will follow Millhaven's lead and boycott the program, forego personal gratification in the name of collective rights. We weren't allowed a chance to ask Sean Shannon that. We didn't give the system enough notice. But any kind of carnal martyrdom won't work anyway. The Solicitor General in Ottawa is adamant. He won't change the system. He says he's gone far enough and there will be no change in the future which will allow girlfriends or whatever in. The program will be restricted solely to family members and common-law wives.
Thank you very much, Steve. I don't think I have any basic objection to... I've often said, or I was once told and very much impressed, I think it was by Robert Caron, that not to be against any easing of life and tensions in prisons. And he put it to me that if I was sentenced to 40 years in the fanciest hotel, or 20 years, or 10 years, or 6 months in the fanciest hotel in Vancouver and lose my liberty, that I would be a very unhappy person indeed. And that's the kind of civilized attitude you've got to keep in mind. Unless, of course, the whole scheme goes overboard, because prison, whether the inmates committees like it or whether the social workers like it or not, is first of all for the protection of the public, the deterrent to repetition of crimes, and rehabilitation of the prisoner. Now, a little bit of a news story. David Helliwell, the president of BRIC, leaves for Japan this afternoon to meet in Japan Edgar Kaiser, who will be, if the deal goes through, at $55, a director of BRIC, and also the sales marketing agent at about $12 or $13 million a year. I was just talking to Mr. Helliwell a moment ago, and he tells me that they're going out just to assure the Japanese that they want them to continue to be partners, 40% partners, in the reconstructed, or the new BRIC, once it has the takeover of the $55 shares. Premier Bennett will be here tomorrow morning. Now, we're going to talk principally about the Constitution, and seriously. But I may get a chance to ask him about his attitude on BRIC, that as the doctor who delivered the baby, he's not perhaps to blame for how the baby grows up. I would rather put it perhaps a little less delicately as the father of the baby, who should be very concerned about the welfare of his child. And I think apart from the millions that people seem to have made with great aplomb on the Kaiser side, there is a legitimate public concern indeed, because this, like it or lump it, Helliwell, Bennett or not, is a politically born baby, created by the NDP and delivered and distributed to the public by the government, which still holds the largest block of shares and which appointed the 6 directors, only 4 of whom voted, 3 of whom actually voted because another 2 were ineligible because of their holding of Kaiser stock. The Kaiser issue will not go away. if only because the public perhaps fully misunderstands it, but it is an unhappy and an unseemly situation. Not a bad program this morning. Yeah, good program. The abortion by Anton was good. Not the abortion report by Anton was good. Louis Laberge is a gem. We filled you in on my axe grinding on this arrogant, short-sighted behaviour of the Vancouver Police Board. We'll keep you up to date on Kent maximum security, conjugal rights, and we've brought you up to date on Kaiser and a couple of other things. And I'll be back after this break. How did it go this morning, Gladys? Not a bad program.
It was very interesting. It's been a long time since I heard you talk to Louis Laberge.
Isn't it? Laberge is such a vital, bright... This is the great thing about French Canadians. They've got that spark, that bit of vitality that many of us don't have on the West Coast, especially Labour leaders. Eh?
Yeah, but if you sit there, you look like brothers.
Yeah, I'll sue you for that. Tomorrow morning, Premier Bill Bennett, British Columbia, concentrating on the constitutional issues at 9 a.m. precisely. Tonight you'll meet Louis Laberge, the leader of the Quebec Federation of Labour, a self-determinationist for Quebec. Not a separatist, a self-determinationist, and one of the most outspoken Labour leaders in the country, who thinks that the CLC, like Dennis McDermott does, may well be headed for trouble with the international building trade unions. But he covers a whole spectrum of Quebec politics in the most charming and evocative manner.